So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Lattice Feliciano, and I am the Art Grants Manager at Redline Contemporary Art Center. And that means I get to manage a bunch of really wonderful grant programs that Redline administers. So the INSITE Fund, Arts and Society, which opens next month, and then other opportunities that come our way. Redline essentially acts as the administrator of these grants. So funders of various types come to us and say, hey, you know how to reach artists, you know how to connect with the community, help us get these funds to folks. So that's our role. And joining us today is Louise Martirano, our executive director. Louise, you want to say hello?
Hello. No, more than hello. Thank you all for being here. And yeah, I super always excited about the opening of this fund because it really uniquely was pitched for all of you in the sense that like there is not enough streams of funding directly to artists. You usually have to navigate institutional relationships. And this is really about kind of tearing that down and just opening the door to a direct funding source for artists. So I'm very excited that Warhol only continues to see how important this type of funding stream is, and they keep bringing on more partners as part of this program across the country. So yeah, I think that actually just helps to benefit a network of support, not only regionally, but nationally. So thank you for your interest in this program and nice to meet you all. And thank you for being here today to help Lada's email inbox also.
Yes. Thanks, Louise. We're so glad you're here, and thanks for bringing this program to Redline. I think we were one of the earlier-ish
Ish, yeah.
institutions to be part of this. But now, great segue, we are part of the Andy Warhol Foundation for the Visual Arts Regional Regranting Program. And what's cool about this program is we are one of 35 programs across the country. So this includes Albuquerque, Baltimore, Chicago. You'll notice most of them are regional or a metro area based. So we're just really, really stoked to be part of this extensive network. And that network comes into play during our jury process. So that's something to think about when you're putting together your proposal, is it's also an opportunity to have someone from one of these other institutions see your work. Okay, so what is the INSITE Fund? We'll just get right into it. So we have talked a lot about the Andy Warhol Foundation for the Visual Arts and how this is part of their regional regranting program. Their vision with this program is really to empower regional arts institutions, organizations, collectives to kind of see where the community need is for arts funding and to put it into play. So here in Denver Metro and along the Front Range, administered by Redline, we have the INSITE Fund. And the INSITE Fund provides grants of $5,000 of up to $10,000 to directly support independent artists and artist collectives. We'll go into more of like the kind of details momentarily here, but it's really important just for everyone coming to the room that it's independent artists and artist collectives. This grant does not fund 501c3 nonprofits. We do not require a fiscal sponsor because we are funding specifically artists and artist collectives. Additionally, this grant specifically seeks to support projects that expand the public's understanding of the visual arts and make visible, often unseen and under-supported artistic activity. So what does this mean exactly? So first, we'll talk about the location of where the work takes place geographically, and then we'll talk about where the work takes place setting-wise. So geographically, the INSITE Fund covers a 115-mile radius of Denver within the state of Colorado. So you see this beautiful circle here that shows the area in which the INSITE Fund covers. Essentially, what we're doing here is covering the Front Range all the way down to Pueblo, acknowledging the really vibrant and active arts community that is down there in Pueblo, and then also making some space for some of our work, our creative work that's happening both a bit over there in the plains and then to the west as well. So you'll see we have here listed our boundaries: Norfolk to the north, really right there on the state line, Pueblo to the south, Akron to the east, and then Walcott to the west. And if you have questions about the geographic location, if you're just not sure, shoot me an email and we can look at the map together. I understand, these things it can be kind of confusing, and we did recently expand our reach, and we want to make sure that everyone is clear on those boundaries. So then after the geographic location, where is the setting that the work takes place in? All projects must take place outside of the studio, museum, art center, or traditional gallery. And actually, before I jump into that, Louise, did you want to talk a little bit about what that means to be outside of a studio, museum? Just a little bit more about that space. I think you
Yeah.
speak to it really well.
Yeah. So, a little bit from what I was, the preamble, that, I think Redline, as a very artist-driven and artist-centric institution, have heard years and years and years of artists being like, look, that if you don't have the keys to the gates to get into institutions, you don't get your work seen. And if you don't have those types of, levers because you are new to the community, or you just haven't felt welcome for all the reasons, this fund is speaking into those spaces. And so, you don't have to be from a urban center that has tons of contemporary art spaces. You can be, in a more rural location, outside of Longmont or Lyons, or, between Colorado Springs and Pueblo, and where there really are not art centers, and you can have a relationship with, potentially it's like a, even like a nature preserve where works can happen in spaces and accessible to community that is not through an institutional stewardship that is grounded in contemporary art. So really the idea is for it to remove a barrier, not add one. And so this is one that, if you are having a hard time, kind of thinking about your practice and your idea outside of contemporary art spaces or institutional spaces, we're happy to kind of, chat with you about that, that idea and that opportunity. But it's really trying to bring things out into public space so it's more accessible.
Thanks so much, Louise. No, that's so great. I appreciate it, because I feel like I get very kind of stuck on the bullet points, and then you speak to the essence very well. So thank you. Why are we doing this? Why are you doing it this way? So thank you very much. And all of that that Louise spoke to connects to the eligibility pieces. So all projects must be anchored in a visual arts practice. Now, when we think of Andy Warhol, right, we know that is expansive, and it looks a lot of different ways. And there are some clear lines that the Warhol Foundation does draw for us. So one of those is we do not fund works of theater, for example. So if it is performance art that is rooted in visual art that is happening in a public space, that's certainly eligible and something we'd love to hear more about. But if it is we are a scrappy theater company and we need funds to run our summer season, that doesn't apply. And if you're not sure about where those lines are, I am going to put in the chat at the end of the meeting a link to set up times to meet with me. I have office hours available for folks who just want to kind of noodle through their project a little bit more and understand where their project lands among all of these things. So just know
Yeah,
that's an option. Oh, go ahead, Louise.
no, yeah. No, and just one thing to note on this too is you know, because this is anchored in relationship to a lineage of Warhol's identity, many of Redline's regranting programs sit at intersections of, arts and society. Lotta is this other regranting baby, as well as arts and, social change or social awareness. This fund in particular really, does not necessarily ask for the ampersand. So it really can be rooted in your visual arts practice, and that can show up at an intersection of arts and social justice or art and community responsiveness, etc. But it is okay also if you're just wanting to go alongside a line of a visual arts experience that is accessible to the public and audiences, but not necessarily premised on a social cause, which I think is just a distinction I like to share, just because of the the through line through a lot of our programming and a lot of our content, and a lot of where artists can start, kind of trying to decide what stream is best for funding for their practice and what they're doing in their community.
Awesome. Thanks, Louise. Right on. Yeah. So, and I'll have some examples at the end of their presentation as well. So you'll get an idea of kind of the different ways this manifests. Sometimes there's very much like a social issue or a social call. And sometimes it's very much like we just want to put art in the middle of a place you don't expect it to be. And that in and of itself is like really destructive in a cool way, but isn't necessarily like social justice art. So, there's a lot of room here. All right. And so just a few other things. We mentioned this already, but just to emphasize, grant funds are intended for individual artists and artist collectives. The fund does not support 501c3 nonprofit organizations. Now, if you are connected to a nonprofit, maybe there are some folks in the room. I know a lot of us, a lot of us artists live like many lives. Perhaps you are proposing a project where you'd be working with a nonprofit. They might be a partner in some way, shape, or form, but you, the artist, are the one receiving the funds, managing the funds. It's your own individual project. So that's just something to consider and think about. If you've been, thinking about working with some group, I don't want you to immediately think that is off the table. It's just that the folks who are applying for this and receiving these funds are individual artists and artist collectives, not nonprofits. Additionally, the fund is meant to support short-term initiatives, events, and new collaborations. So what this means is, this isn't like, hey, I've been doing this project for 10 years and I need to sustain it somehow. I know that like many of us probably have like 3 of those projects in our pockets, but those are not the projects for this fund. This is a 1-year grant, so you are expected to complete the project within 1 year. And so for that reason, we're really looking for these short-term initiatives, pop-ups, those sort of kind of ephemeral like Andy, if you will. And again, funded projects must take place within 115 miles of Denver, and the lead artist and organizer must reside within 115-mile radius of Denver. So we are looking at, again, I'll go back because I'm, oops, visual, but here's the, oh, sorry, you guys. Here's the map again that shows you, and again, the list of those towns. So for those of you on the call who maybe have friends, artists, connections, people that you know who are in these areas, a little bit more rural and kind of along the Front Range, please spread the word and share this with them, because we do want to make sure that our artists in Pueblo, Springs, et cetera, up there in Fort Collins and beyond are hearing about the grant. Okay, some more eligibility, and a lot of this is repeat, but we're just kind of emphasizing the key points here. Funded projects should take place outside of the traditional gallery, art center, studio, or museum location. So if you are a museum, this isn't for you. We love what you do. And this is really about bringing art into kind of unexpected spaces, spaces where maybe art goers don't go. And so you're kind of introducing the general public, if you will, to an experience of contemporary art. The fund does not support an individual's ongoing studio practice, underwrite exhibitions in existing program schedules, or works of traditional theater. So we talked about theater a little bit already, but you know, if you're like, man, I just really want a 3D printer, and like now is the time, and I just want a grant to get me a 3D printer. That's awesome, and like fully support the vision, but this is not a grant just for you know, supplies and equipment for your studio practice, or you know, framing work for an upcoming show. It's really about creating an experiential piece of work that is site specific. Again, projects must be completed within a 12-month grant cycle, and projects must be presented in publicly accessible spaces. And when we say publicly accessible, this is pretty broad. The internet is a publicly accessible place. The sidewalk, billboards, parks, medians, all sorts of spaces. So again, we'll have examples at the end to kind of get your wheels turning on what these kinds of spaces look like. But again, really thinking outside of a gallery, a museum, a space you walk in and expect to see what we know as art. Okay, so now we're going to go into the application details. Our hope is that the application is pretty straightforward and not too cumbersome, but if you have issues, just reach out and let me know what your questions are. Happy to answer. We want pretty basic information. What's the title of your project? It can be a working title, but project title, lead artist name and email, list of your collaborators, partners. So for example, you might be representing an artist collective, for example. Awesome. We love it. What we want to see in that case is who is the main point person, list them as the lead, artist name and email. That's the person who's going to like get the emails and respond to them. And then you can list everyone else in your list of partners and collaborators. We want to know where it's taking place, city and county. And then if you have a website, you're welcome to include it. It's not required. And then this information is really to help us visualize and imagine the project that you're proposing. So location description, where is it? Let's say you have a park in your neighborhood that just doesn't get used a lot and you want to put some sculptures there. Tell us about the park. Why that park? Where is it located? What's the neighborhood like? Who goes there? Who hangs out there? Who's going to see it? As much as you can do in 100 words. Then you have time for a short project description. So how is that space being activated? What are you doing? What are the sculptures about? What are you hoping people will take away from it? And then for your full project description, you get to really, really dig into all of those things. So between those three, I mean, there's four pieces here where you're writing, but especially those first three, we're really getting a sense of where, and then what is happening, what is the intention, how is it visual arts, right? How does it line up with that part of the eligibility? How is it using the space? And then I also just like to point out that for the short project description, oftentimes that's like what will be used in a press release should you get chosen to be funded. So think about it from a marketing standpoint. You're in an elevator and someone says, "What's this thing you're doing?" And you just have you have a minute to tell them. That's what that short project description is. full project description is let's get into it. What's really happening? We want details. And then the last written part is describe how you plan to activate your project and make it publicly accessible. And this is really going further into the location and yeah, and how are people going to see it? Is there, for example, is there an event that you're hosting to launch this work is now accessible to the public? It's now available. Let's say you are activating a storefront, for example. That's like a fun, I love that personally. But so is there some sort of social media campaign that you're doing to draw people to it? Are there QR codes that connect people to more information? What does that activation look like, and how are people engaging with it beyond it just being there? And again, like think about Andy Warhol and like just like the spirit of bringing contemporary art into spaces in a way that is both fun and questioning, right? It's like, huh, but huh, you know, because it's really about inviting people who are maybe just passing by to be like, what, art? And again, we've got examples. A couple other things in your application that you have to include. We do ask for a budget timeline. Look, time is fluid. A uh, it is a malleable force in our lives, and so we understand that what you put in your timeline today might change. That's fine. We expect it. We know things shift. This is really to give us an idea of your vision for how this is going to be mapped out. What are the key points? When do certain things have to be decided? And when is the thing, whatever the thing is? Also a budget, and we have a budget example or a budget template, but I think it's like deep in the website somewhere. So I'm going to making a note now to put it on the front page of the website so it's easier to find. But so we do ask for a budget. And again, you don't have the money yet. You're envisioning how you would spend the funds, what you would need, what is the most crucial to make this happen. So it's none of this is set in stone. It's really giving us a sense of you envisioning and planning your project and helping us to really see what it looks like. I always advise folks when working on budgets for any kind of grant application, but particularly in the arts, your budget is another opportunity to tell your story. So through your budget line items, you show your values and the things that are important in your work. Are you paying other artists? Are you using local vendors? Are you paying community members for their time and labor if you're asking for that? Are you paying yourself? Yes, you are. Yes, you are. And things like that. So it's a way to show, this is what we're going to do with this money. And then we do ask for up to 10 artwork examples. And then there's an opportunity to just provide the kind of details for those artwork examples. Artwork samples, I think, can get really stressful for folks, so I'll just talk about it for a little second. We don't expect that you have like fully generated renderings for every inch and corner of this project you're proposing. If you do, that's awesome, and we absolutely want to see it. And we don't expect that you are at that stage necessarily. You might be. What we do want to see are examples of things that you've done before that demonstrate the level of work, skill, knowledge that is needed to pull this off. So like, for example, if you are submitting a proposal to do some big, massive steel sculpture in the desert, which sounds awesome, but then all of your work examples are like soft sculpture in like, like in your house or whatever. Like, it's like, okay, we're soft, we're inside. Like, this isn't showing me what you're doing. Okay, but maybe you do want to branch off from soft sculpture into steel. Heck yeah. That's where we do want to see some sketches, some drawings, um, some kind of envisioning of what you're doing. It's not necessarily going to be like fully executed CAD drawings or whatever. That's fine. But essentially, what you're doing with these work samples is showing us what you've done before, what you know how to do, and your ability to figure out what you don't know. And then we do ask for professional references. This is just contact information. We don't ask for letters, but it's just contact information. So when our panel gets to the point of making final decisions, it's helpful for us to reach out to folks and say, okay, like so and so wants to build this giant steel sculpture, but they have only, made plush berries. Like, what do you think? And then they're like, heck yeah, they can do that because they interned with me on this thing and yada, yada, yada. So, think about folks who can speak to your experience, speak to your competence, and who've maybe worked with you before. Okay, so we're going to jump into budget, everyone's favorite thing. We talked about this a little bit already. Again, you really can tell a lot of the story of your project through your budget. So, including artist and design fees, this is fees for yourself and any other collaborators. Any materials that you think you're going to need, and this can be really tough, especially with inflation. I know things change drastically, right? But to your best guess, like what are you going to need and what's it going to cost? Do you need a workspace to make this happen? Do you need to pay for a venue to hold the event or happening, whatever that is? What kind of physical space costs do you have? Are you going to need equipment? Are you hanging something from ceilings? You might need a lift. That's a line item. It's a pretty hefty one. So make sure you include that. Marketing, advertising, and communications. Redline does a fair amount to help and support and spread the word about your projects. But we're just we're one entity, and you might want to go ahead and budget for flyers. Maybe you want to pay someone to document it, to videotape, to photograph, things like that. Installation costs, like what is it going to take to put this thing together? And then I always tell folks to remember taxes. If you are receiving the funds as an individual, you'll want to go ahead and incorporate that into your artist fee. You want to make sure that your artist fee includes whatever you anticipate having to pay for taxes. Everyone's tax situation is different. And for those folks who do get funded, we can absolutely help you kind of walk through that. But that's something that you want to keep in mind as well. Louise, anything on budget you want to throw in there or add?
No, I just, you're certainly welcome also to include like below your budget, your in-kind support. So sometimes, if the budget, not intentionally, but is leaving holes in terms of like, yeah, how things will happen and maybe doesn't address every aspect because you are counting on utilizing some of your own equipment or you're utilizing some of your own, relationships or whatever, feel free to add any sort of in-kind support. Sometimes that's a nice way of showing the panel that this is something that you already have some community buy-in to do. It's not necessary and not required, but just again, the budget tells a story. It tells a story of, how you're thinking about your needs. And so just think of it that way. It doesn't need to be too granular. You don't have to like, divide it up between, every grain of sand, every grain of sand that comes forward in your energy and your soul to make this happen. But if you feel like that in-kind support is helping to tell a part of this story and how it's going to happen, then I would say, add that at the bottom of your budget, to just kind of say, the kind of the resourceful work you've done prior to help the project be successful.
Awesome. Thanks, Louise. I appreciate that. You always have something that I like forgot to mention, so it's
No,
very
I mean,
helpful.
no one lives and dies on in-kind budgets, but if it
I'm pretty sure most of us kind of live on in-kind budgets though.
yes, that's actually, I guess
So
that is actually kind of true.
so it's important to note and to consider, like, yeah, if you already have you've got a fleet of equipment that you've invested in, or I mean, gosh, if you know someone with a lift, that's a godsend. Um, but those things are just they're valuable. So don't forget. Okay, cool. So next up is the review process. So the applications will be reviewed first online through Submittable by a jury of 5 local and national jurors. And so I mentioned this a little bit at the beginning of the call, but we always have, usually it's 3 folks from the Front Range, so along and within that radius. And then we have 2 folks from outside of Colorado. So usually that includes at least 1 person from the Andy Warhol Regional Regranting Network, as well as other artists and curators from other parts of the country. So I do think, if you're kind of on the fence about whether or not you want to submit, and you're like, I don't know if I'm quite there yet, or I'm not sure. If you feel stoked about what is percolating at all, like go ahead and put it in front of these eyes, because it can't hurt to have it seen. We are still working on our jury now, and we will add those folks to the website once they are confirmed. And it's always just always a really, really cool group of folks, and really, really great to see their kind of insights and perspectives on all the applicants. I know, I'm sorry, Louise, it's painful puns. Um, but
Not
truly,
a
it's,
sad moment.
oh my God, no. Our local bookstore, I live in Alamosa, and we have this amazing local bookstore. They were giving out jars of dad jokes this past weekend, which was hilarious and obviously affecting me a little too much. But I just love to emphasize how great the jury is, because yeah, they help connect our Denver Metro Front Range artist communities to work that is happening beyond in other parts of the country. So it's really cool. Things that the jury considers: location. Again, that geographic region, you'll be asked that first thing when you apply, to just make sure you're eligible. It really, really helps us if you just know that ahead of time. And if you're not sure, please reach out. But if we see an application from somewhere outside of that region, you just will automatically be disqualified. Things that the jury will be asking: does the project take place in a publicly accessible space? So if your idea is to do a series of, kind of modern performance art in your living room, like, again, that sounds really great, like fully support. But how are people able to attend this? How can anyone engage with it? Does the project add to and expand definitions and understandings of the visual arts? So this is back to that kind of imagine Andy and thinking about the expansiveness of visual arts, and the various ways it can unfold. Is this a project where you are just, putting a series of beautiful drawings in frames and putting them on a wall? even if it's like a publicly accessible wall, right? It's like, how is it, how is it expanding and really encouraging us to question our understanding of visual arts? And then collaboration. How does the project leverage collaboration in service of that audience engagement? So, you know, how is the artist or artists engaged with the site itself? If the site is a neighborhood park, well, what do they know about the neighborhood and how are they engaged with the neighborhood? Do they, you know, do they go there regularly? Do they have, you know, what does that look like? Help us see those connections as they organically exist. And then, of course, professional presentation, performance, and execution. Does the concept and presentation of the concept demonstrate artistic strength? And, you know, for us, artistic strength is that's a broad, it's a broad term, a broad phrase. We're really looking at a commitment to seeing through a thoughtfully executed project that really engages all of the eligibility, you know, items that were listed. So, you know, is it in the location that we asked for? Are you really looking at the ways that you can engage community? Are you really thinking about challenging visual arts and engaging non-arts folks? What does that look like? How is this expanding your own practice? How is this benefiting you as an artist? How is this challenging and growing your own work? So these are the kinds of things we want you to be thinking about and that the jury will be looking at. So I'm going to go into some, just looking at the time real quick. I'm going to go into some examples. We'll go through those pretty quickly here so we have time for questions. And then I'll put some more links in the chat as well. Well, first I'll tell you about the timeline. So the application is open and it will close on Friday, July 12th. And that is at 11:59 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. It's very much Cinderella in the pumpkin, like at midnight, the application is a pumpkin and it no longer exists. And so for that reason, that's why we got, you know, 11:59. I very much encourage you to get your application in before that deadline. I encourage you to get it in the day before, 2 days before, 3 days before. Technology is fickle and you don't want Mercury to be in retrograde the minute that you need to submit your application. Not saying I've never submitted something at 11:50, but just knowing from experience, it's really, really best to get it in early. If you have problems, technical issues at midnight on Friday, I can't guarantee that you're going to get assistance. And then in October, we will be announcing the award recipients. And in November 2025, that is when we expect to see the grant project completed. And then you'll be working with me throughout that project year. And, you know, as things come up and change, I'm here to support and assist. And then there's my contact info there. I'll also put that in the chat momentarily. Okay, so a few examples, because I think this is really where it's like all of this jargon like starts to make sense. It's like, oh, okay, I get it now. So this is a 2023 grantee. Alex Branch, Ben Coleman, and Esther Hernandez. They are doing a project called Off the Merry-Go-Round Traveling Zoetrope Installation. And so using their various skills, this is a combination of artists working together who work across media. So sound art, performance, installation, sculpture. They are going to be teaming up to create a large-scale traveling zoetrope experience. So they're setting it on various school playgrounds and creating a zoetrope built upon the kind of traditional merry-go-round that you see here in the image. This is like site specific, right? Like it's very site specific. I love this project because of how it's just such a clear memory for me and for other folks in my generation. And it's kind of like, I feel like these merry-go-rounds are sort of like phone booths, like you just kind of don't see them as much these days. So like part of their like magical artist challenge is locating these merry-go-rounds to then turn them into a zoetrope, and then through that inviting folks to come and engage. And so they are working hard at getting those locations identified and planning this awesome program. 2022 grantee example, Stephen Yazzie. This project is called Gold King and Associates, and he's done this kind of all over Colorado, up and down the Front Range. But this particular iteration was in Denver. And this project takes the form of a real estate sign. So here it kind of gives the illusion, the appearance that this property is for sale, which, like we see this stuff all over the place, right? But if an interested party calls the phone number on the sign, they will hear a poem, a quote, an excerpt from a story, a personal writing addressing the environmental concerns about urbanization, land use, overdevelopment, colonization, gentrification, all of these things. So it's using a really kind of seemingly innocuous symbol that we just see regularly, especially in Denver Metro and across the Front Range, where housing is increasingly difficult and expensive. This sign that gives the illusion that it's just part of the gig. And then like back to the point of how are people engaged and how are people who are not arts people engaged? The people who are calling this number are people who want to buy the property, they're like developers. They're like, and then they get to hear a poem. I just love that. I love imagining that moment. And yeah, very clever use of space, of a variety of art forms, and engaging people in a unique way. And then in 2019, we had Jessica Langley and Ben Kinsley did The Yard, and I think The Yard is still happening. They are really, really wonderful, wonderful folks who earlier I gave the example of, well, you wouldn't be able to do a project that took place in your living room, but you could do a project that takes place in your yard. So these folks said, hey, we're in this neighborhood, the Divine Redeemer neighborhood of Colorado Springs. There's not a whole lot of art like right here in this neighborhood, and we want to bring people together in a creative way. And so they now have turned their yard into a rotating exhibition space. They've brought several different artists into that space from all over the world, everything from installation to sculpture to video. It's really, really, really cool. And their projects have grown quite a bit too. So really recommend checking them out and driving by if you're in Springs. But this is another really unique use of space and use of kind of the idea of engaging people in unique ways. And then lastly, the last example I have for you is The Controlled Wild. This is Nicholas Emery and Emily Upsek. And this is a film that they created together. It was a partnership between the two of them, kind of combination of photography and kind of ambient storytelling. And very much about, the film itself is very much about just sort of this changing of landscapes and how rural and ranching landscapes so quickly transform. And so you're kind of like, okay, well, a film, this isn't a film grant. This isn't like the film office funding this. This was a really, really unique, they came up with a really unique way of sharing the work. And so you'll see here on the photos, they created this work and then premiered it on the outside of the History Colorado building. And this is just one of several screenings they did where they're showing the work outside in public spaces, people are just driving down the road, walking down the street, like it's just there, it's happening. And so thinking about creative ways to project and share digital work in those kinds of ways is another kind of avenue to be thinking about when you're considering the location piece. Okay, so I am going to see, I'm going to stop sharing now so we can go ahead and move into questions. And I feel like our room is small enough that folks can just kind of unmute and jump on in if you have questions about literally anything. Yeah, Lori.
Okay, I'm on my iPhone, so I can't see like other people. But hi. So my question is like, if you've received it, can you apply again? If you've received it in the past?
Yes, if you are complete on your reporting. So anyone who has received the funds in the past and has gotten INSITE funding, as long as you have completed your project and are fully up to date on your reporting, you absolutely can apply again. And if you're not sure about that, you can just shoot me an email and we can talk about it and work through all of the details. But yeah, the short answer is yes.
Okay. Then second part to the question, because I'm not sure yet which project I'm applying for. So in one case, it's a curatorial project that Esther and I are working on together, but it's within Union Hall, but like it would be for a component of. Okay, so it's like, I think I've told you about it before. It's like a collaboration between dancers and sculptors that we're curating with 3 dancers and 3 sculptors. But the performances will take place off site wherever they want to be. But, you know, what we would be applying for the grant for would be the documentation of those performances to be in the exhibition. So it falls into a weird gray area. Like, and so like it would be to support the performances on site and to document the performances on site. And the documentation would be shown in the gallery, but it's really more about the documentation and the editing of that video by somebody that we would pay.
Right. And then I think at that point, the question then is how is that documentation accessible to the public in a space that is not a traditional gallery?
Well, the performance would not be in a traditional gallery. The performance would be, we don't know, we're going to let them choose, but the performance would be outside somewhere probably, or like in a non-traditional site. So the performance would be what people would be able to attend. The
So knowing
performance
that,
itself
or at
doesn't have
least
a cost.
yeah. So
Yeah.
knowing that, or at least having a sense, and this actually goes towards the one of the questions in the chat as well about whether or not you have like approval for these spaces. It's really the best, as much clarity as you can have about the space, the better. As much clarity,
Okay.
and clarity includes approval if it is needed, right? But we
I don't
also
know if we'll
understand.
know that by then, but
Right, right.
yeah.
So as much clarity as you're able to provide, but it is a gray area, Lori. And so in that case, you're gonna really want to be able to clearly identify that publicly accessible space because Union Hall wouldn't count for the grant.
Right, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Okay. I think we
Oh,
don't even know yet if that's what we're doing, but like yeah.
I'm going to jump in here just because
Okay.
I think this question that Katie has in the chat is important and it's a little bit more thorough than what I can type out specifically, but you know, offer some guidance and understanding the major differences between the INSITE grant and the Arts and Society grant. The major difference is the Arts and Society grant, you really have to go in with cross-sector collaboration. So you have to identify who on whatever side of the ampersand you are working with is affiliated with and committed to the project. So if you're coming to it as an artist, you need to have your kind of the social side affiliation also at the table. So like, the Well Power or Denver Homeless Out Loud or etc. With the INSITE grant, you don't need to have any collaborators. You can really have a independent project that is really publicly accessible, not acceptable. Public acceptable is probably a good measure too. But who says what's acceptable? But the INSITE grant is truly just your practice in public space that allows for a unique experience. It can be experimental work, it can be all sorts of different types of work, but doesn't have that criteria that Arts and Society does. Oftentimes with the Arts and Society grant, you have to have letters of support. And again, that social issue that you're addressing has to be identified. This grant does not require a social issue to be identified. This grant does not require that cross-sector collaboration. So hopefully that is a good clarification for Katie.
Thank you, Louise. There are also geographical differences. Arts and Society is a statewide opportunity, whereas we are in this very defined bubble for the INSITE Fund. And so that is another factor. Yay, glad that was helpful. And I did put in the chat a link for my office hours. So I am available for 20-minute phone calls to just kind of talk through your project. If you have questions, if you're not sure if it fits or is in the geographical region or any of these things that you're just like, I don't know. I'm really happy to chat with you. I'm also putting my email address in here so you can shoot me an email if you have questions. For the office hours, right now they start in July. I'm just working through some scheduling things and hopefully we'll have some more times open up next week as well. So just kind of stay tuned on that, but go ahead and grab a spot for July if you know you want to get 20 minutes of chat time. We have a couple more minutes. I want to make sure we get to as many questions as we can. Are there other questions in the room?
I had a question.
Hey,
I was
Greg.
just wondering hey, how's it going? So in terms of traditional art spaces, I didn't know if universities were considered a part of the traditional spaces, specifically targeting students.
Sorry, go ahead, Lattice. I don't want to cut you off.
I was just gonna say, I just like immediately went to an example in my mind. Is it being shown in a gallery space or a hallway at the university, or is it like wheat pasted outside on all the buildings that people going through see? Like where's the work happening?
So it's an experimental publication. So the work would be happening with the individual, but the accessibility aspect of it, it would be at particular locations around Denver, but primarily geared towards universities and younger artists.
So just so we're hearing you correctly, is it print media that is going to be what is viewed?
It's a print media. It's a publication. So I applied with the same project last year, but I'm attempting to get it funded this year as well. But it's an experimental publication geared primarily towards finances for artists. So I'm aiming primarily at 20 to 25-year-olds in university.
And you plan to have this just kind of available like in, department lobbies, or, how are people accessing the publications?
So they're accessing it via like the postal service. So I'm reaching out to professors and getting them to graduate students and then undergraduates who are graduating, just to prep them for life outside of university. But it'll also be at like bars, art studios, galleries, those types of things as well.
Well, then I would probably recommend, just so that you don't get scrutinized in weird ways that sometimes jurors introduce. I would almost say like you have landing page, like a website where it is like the publication can be ordered or can be accessed that is beyond your personal outreach. Because where I think there'll be a sticking point is when we say something is publicly accessible and you are the only way that they can get to it versus stumbling upon it on the internet. I just worry that there will be scrutiny around that. But if you say in your application that you're going to have a distribution list and you emphasize that distribution list. So in addition to like a place where people can go to order or learn more, or, also ordering is a little funky because I feel like Warhol wants things to be free. That's actually kind of a big deal also with them. So, I would just say,
yeah,
yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
It would be free. Yeah.
Okay.
I was gonna say it would be free, completely free.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. Yeah, so then maybe just like you're going to call out like 5 places that you're going to do drops of the publications, as well as grounding it to a place where people can find out and learn more. Or maybe there's a digital copy online or something you can do to make it so you're not necessarily the only way to access your work. Does that make sense?
Okay. That does make sense. Just opening it up to more digital distribution as well as physical.
Yeah, like you have to make the case of how just anyone can stumble upon the work, versus them having a direct connection to you and emailing you in order to get it, in other words.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Sorry, that's tricky, but I feel like that's the best advice I can give when it comes to, yeah.
Thanks, Louise. I appreciate it. All right. Well, sure, we
Okay,
can do one
time?
more quick question. Yeah,
One more.
go ahead.
It'll be a quick one. It might be being way too literal. Can the work that I'm doing be in a traditional space? Like I can see I will need to be going to the location I'm thinking about to get inspiration, materials, some other ideas, research, but the actual production of the work can not have to be on site, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, no,
I just wanted to make sure. There was one slide and I'm like, oh my God, do I have to do everything on site?
no, yeah,
Okay.
the idea is that it can't fund studio practice. Like, for example, you can't give us your studio rent. You can't give us the supply list for what is beyond what the project requires. So that is just saying like, and also your studio may not be publicly accessible, so it's just, it's no, you're going to make the work where you make the work. The work needs to be installed and accessible in these non-traditional spaces, not the studio, not the gallery, not the museum, not the Contemporary Arts Center.
And then really an emphasis on the visual aspect of it and the public accessibility. Like those two to me really stood out.
Yeah.
Expanding your idea of that.
Soundworks, and there can be, other, performance art and etc.
Yeah.
It just, but yeah, I think tying it to a visual lineage is probably a good idea because of, the origin of the fund, but yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Cool. All right. Well, we appreciate you joining us on this solstice afternoon. I hope folks have something cool and relaxing to do. In the chat, I have my office hour link as well as my email. So take note of that. And then we will also be recording this, or we are recording it, and we'll be sharing it out for you to send to friends and review later. So thank you all so much. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you.